This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
There is nothing like a home away from home. Someplace where you feel welcome, at ease, somewhere you appreciate, just as if it were your own. We go inside outdoors with a man who found just such a place. It was in the early 90s when he first began to explore eastern Kentucky's Red River Gorge. Author and photographer John Snell of Lexington chats about his new book, Red River Gorge, My Second Home. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
You know our patch, but there are some things about the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife you may have never dreamed. Like 150,000 acres of wilderness we own for public enjoyment, leading the way in land conservation. From the majestic elk to the short-tailed shrew, healthy habitat helps them all. Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, your partner in the great outdoors. And you thought we were just fishing and hunting. Hunt more at fw.ky.gov.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear, flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund, the natural tax shelter.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield. My name is Charlie Baglin. You know, this is quite the state we live in. Wetlands in the west to the mountains in the east. And in eastern Kentucky is also found the Daniel Boone National Forest. And buried within that, in Powell, Wolf, and Menifee counties, is a real gem. It sits quietly to itself, all 45 square miles of it. It's a hiking and rock climbing mecca. It is home to countless songbirds and wildlife. And it's the second home to my guest, John Snell. John is a photographer from Lexington, and if you've heard that name, it's likely in connection to the outstanding outdoor images he's taken. He has now finished a second book, and from cover to cover, it covers his favorite place in the state, if not the world. Published by Acclaim Press, the book is called Red River Gorge, My Second Home. John, welcome.
Thank you, Charlie. So glad to be here.
I like the looks of this, Red River Gorge, My Second Home. I bet you a lot of people can say that. Have you found that in your experience in chatting about the book?
On numerous occasions I have, and I've had some people order books for gifts, and they say, well, my son Joe considers Red River Gorge to be his second home, so can you write something in the book about that? So, yes, a lot of people are very passionate about Red River Gorge and have a kinship sort of to it.
You page through this book, and you can see yourself reflected in it, if that's wildlife or plants or seasons or rock climbing or camping. I spent a lot of time with my cousin David, and we loved to backpack. We saw a lot of what's pictured in this book. However, I feel like there's a lot we missed. And I'm wondering how much beyond just that trail system is the gorge.
It's my understanding that when you include the Indian Creek area, which is sort of northwest of what we think of as the gorge, and then the Clifty Wilderness, which is on the northeast side, there's approximately 43,000 acres of territory. I believe there are about 70 miles of official trails that are maintained, and then there are probably at least that many miles of what are referred to as user trails that have been created by people going to favorite spots. Even as much as I've been to Red River Gorge, there's a large expanse of it that I have not seen, and probably due to some of the remoteness of it, I won't ever get to see.
We know this is your second book on the Red River Gorge. The first was
Red River Gorge, The Eloquent Landscape. And I felt like the landscape pretty much spoke for itself, that the photos sort of described just in visual form what the gorge was like.
And the new book?
It starts with a chapter called Daybreak and ends with a chapter called Nightfall, and those are obviously sunrise and early morning and late afternoon and evening photographs. There's a section on what's blooming, water in motion. There's a chapter I call My Second Home, which I feel like contains some of my very favorite photographs of the Red River Gorge. But because I didn't want to sort of shortchange the other chapters, I've tried to spread some of the best of my work throughout all of the book. But the My Second Home chapter, I think, really speaks best for how I love Red River Gorge and enjoy being there. I even did a chapter called Monochrome. It's about 14 photos that I printed in black and white. And there's sometimes when you look at a scene and it just speaks to you that this needs to be in black and white. And I think especially of photos of big skies and white puffy clouds, I think those can be represented very well in black and white.
Looking at the cover, 2 trees, a lot of fog, a beautiful sunrise.
This was an overlook that I found a number of years ago that spoke to me, and I thought I need to go back and photograph that when the conditions are right. It only photographs well in the summertime because mid-May to mid-July time frame is the only time when the sun is actually visible in that part of the sky.
Mm-hmm. It says here, photography and text by you, with a foreword by a man named Oscar Geralds, Jr. Tell me who he is.
Oscar is I guess he's retired now. He's an attorney in Lexington. Back in the 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came forth with a plan to build a dam across the Red River and flood the gorge. It was going to provide another water source for Lexington and central Kentucky, would provide recreational benefits, and a lot of people who had been going to Red River Gorge for a long time and had fallen in love with it did not want that area to be flooded. And Oscar was one of the people very instrumental in putting up resistance, doing legal work and doing things to try to preserve this wonderful natural resource from being put underwater.
I'll say this for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They're good people. They built a lot of dams around the state, creating lakes for water supply, for recreation, for flood control. Their work at heart is very good. In this one situation back in the 60s, some people did take some opposition to it, and I would say for some valid reasons. You had archaeologically significant landmarks that apparently were overlooked, and it was Oscar Geralds, alongside the Sierra Club, that was helping to lead the charge to see if there were ways around it. And I appreciate the work that was done. Every time I go there, if I see Whittleton Arch or Sky Bridge, I got to think, this could be underwater.
Well, absolutely. I have thought that many times when I've been there, and have been grateful to Oscar and other like-minded people who saw it for what we see it as today. And I just really enjoy having a natural resource like that so close to Lexington.
There is an individual I have had the privilege to know over my career, Dr. Bill Martin. He's from Eastern Kentucky University and a former botany and biology professor there. He would take classes of his down to the Red River Gorge, and he was quite the proponent of keeping it preserved. But he made a statement once, I'll never forget it. He says, trees are important even though they don't vote. Many people would have to stand in for the trees. That's much like Oscar Geralds would do, and a lot of other people alongside him. Who was the Supreme Court Justice that also was in on that?
William O. Douglas. Oscar had seen where that Supreme Court Justice had lent his support to another environmental cause, I believe, in the state of Washington. So Oscar invited him to come to Red River Gorge and see if he could throw his support on the side of those who really did not want the dam to be built. It helped to elevate this controversy into the national spotlight and give it some more publicity, and certainly help the cause of those who wanted to preserve the gorge. I know at one point when the controversy began, the Corps of Engineers rethought their plans and said, okay, we'll locate it farther on downriver. But as Oscar Gerald writes in his foreword, that did not seem to be a workable solution either.
We have to get to a break, but I'll say this. If you have this book, don't skip the foreword. That couple of pages that Oscar wrote puts the historical significance of this area into perspective, so much so that I refer to the book not just as stunning pictures, but stunning pictures of the places that were saved. We lace up the boots and probe deeper into Red River Gorge, my second home. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglan, in the studio with photographer and author John Snell. Red River Gorge, My Second Home is the name of his new book. And John, there's adventure on every page. Can you count how many times you've been there?
Well, I know it's been in excess of 600 times since the early 90s, since I've discovered Red River Gorge and for myself and started going.
When you go to the gorge, does one feature of the gorge stand out to you? Say, I'm so glad people now can see this.
It's just a myriad of things, from the wildflowers in the spring to the fall colors. It just has such a variety of features and things to enjoy, whether you're down in the valleys or up on the ridge tops.
I've noticed by thumbing through your book, John, that you like 2 times of day and year to take photographs. One is fall, the other one is early morning.
Yes.
Which do you think is your favorite?
Well, I'd have to say early morning. There's just something about the light, the coolness, the moistness of the air. Quite often there will be fog in the valleys, and I can either be down in that photographing a real moody river scene, as you'll see in some of the photos, or up above the fog and seeing the ridge lines plunge down into it, or some trees sticking up out of the fog and the sun reflecting over the top of it. It's just magical as far as I'm concerned.
Let me ask you some technical questions. You use what type of camera?
I'm a Canon user. I was a Nikon user for about 20 years, and then around 2005, when I was making a serious consideration to switching to digital, at that time Canon had the features that I was most interested in, so I made the switch and have been real happy with my choice.
A good friend of mine told me once, what makes a photographer good is that he or she will never show you their bad work. There was a rule of thumb, if you get one good picture out of a roll of film, you're doing well. Do you still follow that? Did you ever?
The point was brought home to me and some people in the audience. We were listening to a talk by outdoor photographer, columnist DeWitt Jones, who used to photograph for National Geographic. And he said that they would go out on assignment and shoot 12,000 images in order to get 20 pictures for a story. And his point was, it's not how many pictures you take, it's did you get the picture? And sometimes it might take 10 clicks to get the picture. It might take 1,000. I took a trip to the Blue Ridge Parkway with my camera club this past summer, and there are some sequences there where I was determined to get a sharp picture of a bug on a flower, and I had to shoot it handheld. And I probably had 300 or 400 shots in that sequence because I honestly wanted to shoot enough pictures to make sure that I got what I was after.
You have the luxury now with digital photography of just taking photograph after photograph until you turn blue. Your camera would sound like a machine gun going off, taking that many pictures. I don't see anything wrong with that.
No.
Although you do have to weed through. But if you get that one shot, then the day is a success. I'm just going to open to a random page. Maple Wonder. These red leaves against this, what looks like a sycamore tree?
Well, the white bark is actually the maple tree itself.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Surely you can just walk up to the tree and take that in one shot. Is this an example of one you had to labor over, you think?
If I go back to that particular day, which I think was November the 12th of 2007, there probably are 25 at least. I would shoot it vertically, I would shoot it horizontally, I would shoot it up close, I would shoot it as part of a broader scene. I would just try all different kinds of angles and then determine later when I looked at it on my computer which composition I liked the best, and that's the one I would go with.
Cameras these days have an ungodly amount of megapixels. It used to be back in the day you may have 5 or 6 or 7. Now they're up. Mine alone is 16, and I'm seeing them go up to 35 and maybe more. The point is, you can take a picture, enlarge it, and find pictures within the picture. Do you find that when you get home, you look and say, hey, I didn't notice that when I was actually taking this shot, but you find pictures within themselves?
I do sometimes, and I will do a little bit of cropping. I photograph a lot with zoom lenses, and I try to fill the frame as much as possible with that picture within a picture by zooming in closer. The lenses I use in the field range from 17 millimeter wide angle view and up to 400 millimeters. So I've got a wide range, and I can really compose in the field. But your point is well taken, that if you're shooting a 6 megapixel camera and there's something within the photo that you want to crop out and enlarge, you just can't do it. But with a Nikon 36 megapixel or a Sony 42 megapixel, and Canon now has a 50 megapixel camera, with the proper technique and good lenses, you can extract small portions of those images and blow them up to 11 by 14 and still have unbelievable sharpness.
You picked the Red River Gorge, John. That makes me curious. Why not Leviza Fork? Why not the Big South Fork or Mammoth Cave or the wetlands in western Kentucky? What drew you to the gorge?
I used to think when I first started getting interested in photography that I would need to go to the Smokies, or I would need to go to Yosemite or Yellowstone or some of these major national parks in order to make good photographs. And it really delights me at this stage in my career to know that I can make the quality of photographs a place that's an hour from my home that are as good as any that I've made at these other national parks.
Have you roamed around Kentucky itself much?
I joke that my car only knows how to go 2 places, and that's to Keeneland and to Red River Gorge. I like the comfort level that I have there, knowing where to go, having a feel for what's maybe going to happen at certain times of the day, and just really enjoy being in the gorge.
Here in the first chapter of the book, John, you have a photograph called Daybreak. With all the skill you have, with all the equipment you have, to look at some of these photographs, even yourself, you would have to say, I just got lucky with this shot. Is this one of them? Do you ever have that feeling?
Well, there's a lot to be said about being at the right place at the right time. And one of the things that I try to do, if I'm interested in photographing morning fog, I'll try to pay attention to the weather forecast. If we've had rain in the area, if we're having cool nights and warm days, if the temperature's going to drop below the dew point, if there's very little wind, these are things that I take into consideration if I'm really after something like a morning fog shot. And this is one of those overlooks that I had scouted out during the winter months. And if you look closely, you'll notice that this particular tree is the one that's on the left side of the cover of the book.
You're right, it is.
It's the same tree, but I'm just showing one of the two in this one.
Different perspective of it, different side of that photograph. It's just utterly beautiful.
Thank you. And that's one of the things about going so often is DeWitt Jones, to quote him again, he says, put yourself in the place of most potential. So if you're putting yourself out in a beautiful natural area 35 times a year, you're greatly improving your chances of being there when something beautiful is going to happen.
I'm noticing here on page 11, you call this rock star. That's just creative. You're a writer, too, clearly. Nobody could look at this picture of Chimney Rock with the sun sort of bouncing off of it in the shape of a star and come up with rock star. Did you write that?
I did. These titles come to me, and I have to say that after over 20 years of doing art fairs and coming up with images or coming up with titles for the images that I sell at these shows, it becomes more and more challenging. But some of these titles like this one just pop out of my brain some way.
Did you use a filter on this rock star shot to get the star, looks like 5, 6, 7 points on it?
No, when you have a light source that's coming around from behind a solid object and you stop your lens down to f11 or f16, you get that starburst effect. And I read about that in a photography book probably 20 years ago and have employed that a number of places. And one of the things that makes this particular photograph even more interesting, I think, is the frost that's on the trees below Chimney Rock, because the backlighting is so dramatic, and then to have that starburst coming around the side of Chimney Rock, it really adds to it.
Right place at the right time for that shot.
Yes.
The Red River Gorge in Kentucky is the topic this hour, with author and photographer John Snell. The Red River Gorge has a few federal designations. It's not just a gorge, it is also a national natural landmark, a natural archaeological district. It's listed in the National Register of Historic Places. It's a canyon system if you've not been. Sandstone cliffs, rock shelters, waterfalls, and more than 100 natural sandstone arches. Kentucky itself has a wild river system, but Kentucky's only national wild and scenic river is the Red River through the Red River Gorge. We explore more in our next half hour on Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio, and if you would like to hear this show again or share it on Facebook or email the link to maybe a friend of yours, it's pretty easy to do. Just go to Facebook, type in Kentucky Afield Radio. There you can like us, and you will find the weekly link to all of our shows, including this one. You can also find us on iTunes. We are a podcast, as well as YouTube. Just search Kentucky Afield Radio. It's that simple. It's time now for our fishing report.
You know our patch, but there are some things about the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife you may have never dreamed. You've seen shells in a stream bed. In reality, that's aquatic life and nature's own filtration for drinking water. In decline nationally, but on the rebound thanks to science, we've developed clean water from clear thinking. And you thought we were just fishing and hunting. Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. There's more to us when you look beneath the surface. Hunt more at fw.ky.gov.
Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. We are into our second half hour, and we're talking to an award-winning landscape photographer, John Snell of Lexington. His work has been published in several magazines. You've probably seen it. Today we have the opportunity to thumb through his colorful new book, just published, when was that? November of 2015, by Acclaim Press. It's titled Red River Gorge, My Second Home. It's quite a book. It's a heavy book, 11 by 11 inches, hardback. You have 200 brand new photos in this book, along with some stories. You talk about wildlife, plants, water, arches, rock shelters, all seasons of the year. And he shows us these natural wonders in ways we probably have never seen before. The Red River Gorge in east central Kentucky. Lots of different biology there. Hawks, owls, woodpeckers, hummingbirds, neotropical migratory songbirds, deer, fox. There are black bears in the gorge, 2 venomous snakes, copperhead, timber rattlesnake, hunting opportunities, trout fishing. It's alive with wildflowers in the spring. If you've not been, you should go. Natural Bridge State Resort Park is right down there next to it, right off the mountain parkway, so if you've been there, you've been close. There's even an endangered plant there, a species of goldenrod called the white-haired goldenrod. The only place it lives is in the Red River Gorge. Nowhere else is it found on the planet. And John, where can someone get a preview of the book?
They can go to johnsnellphoto.com and look at just a few of the pages. I could probably put a few more of them on there, but it sort of gives you a flavor for how the book is laid out with the captions and the general layout of the book.
I was reading in the book about the photograph you called Morning Magic. Looks like is that winter? Or is it just early morning and fog?
Well, it's in early March, so we haven't gotten any foliage on the trees just yet.
So there's no snow. That's fog, I see.
It's all fog.
Rolling down the hillside.
Yes.
There was a lady that came to one of your art shows and absolutely fell in love with it and brought her to tears. You remember that? Tell me that story.
I was doing an art fair in Louisville, and a lady walked in my booth, and she stood in front of a large 16 by 20 print that was in maybe a 24 by 32 inch double mat, and she stood there for the longest time. Tears were streaming down her face, and I asked her if she was okay, and she said, yeah, this picture just does something to me. And she looked at it some more, and she turned to me and said, I'm going to go and walk some of the rest of the show, and if when I come back here and look at this again, it has the same effect on me, then I'll buy it. So 45 minutes or so later, she came back and she walked in the booth, looked at it, immediately burst into tears, and walked over and handed me her credit card to make the purchase.
That's nice when a photograph can have that kind of impact.
No.
And you've taken a lot of photographs. Have any of your photographs affected anyone else that way?
I have had reactions to a number of photographs for a variety of reasons. In the first Red River Gorge book, I had one of a red leaf on a gravel road in Red River Gorge. Most of the leaves had been run over and were turned brown and dark from just having started to decay, and then there was this one red leaf there, and I called it Among Fallen Friends, and that has spoken to people who have maybe lost loved ones.
Yeah.
There's also a photo in this book called Transition. It's a shot taken across the swinging bridge that goes across the Red River. There was a lady who had lost a child, and photo and its title of Transition somehow made it possible for her to connect with him in some way, and it really spoke to her.
You know, your photographs, your work has meaning beyond just the pages in this book, clearly. I like the chapter that you have done on waterfalls, and I have hiked extensively the Red River Gorge, and I've seen a lot of these waterfalls. I'm curious, though. I've not hiked all times of the year like you have. Are these perennial streams? Are they there only after a rain? How permanent are they?
As you mentioned, a lot of them are seasonal, especially in April and May, when we tend to have a lot of rain and the ground is saturated after winter. And Bell Falls is a good example. It's right beside the road between the Glady Visitor Center and the concrete bridge, and there are times of year when it has a really nice flow to it. It's a very thin band of water that comes over the edge, but during the summer months it's often reduced to a trickle. Anytime you have a lot of rainfall and a lot of moisture in the ground, you can just start walking up some of the drainages, and it doesn't take much water to make a waterfall, to get that nice photographic look that you see with the silky white water. And other than Creation Falls and possibly one called Copperas Creek Falls that I've only been to once, there aren't a lot of waterfalls in the gorge that I'm familiar with that are running year-round, that are easily accessible. But and I do have a few photos that are actually the spillway of Mill Creek Lake at Natural Bridge State Park, and the one that you're looking at on page 43, I believe it is, is one of those photographs. And even though it's a man-made cut, it's still very picturesque to capture that with fall color reflecting in the water, as I have done on 2 or 3 occasions.
Is there a standout waterfall that people will hike to see?
The Creation Falls is the most popular. It's part of the Rock Bridge Loop Trail, and the entire loop is 1.5 miles. The elevation differential is maybe 150 or 200 feet, so it's not considered a strenuous trail. And I think it's one of the most picturesque trails in all of the gorge, because you're walking through some hemlock forest, and at certain times in the spring the dogwoods will be blooming. In early summer, the rhododendron will be blooming on a little cliff alongside the pool below Recreation Falls. So it's a very picturesque area and very popular.
One thing I've noticed you do with your photography of falls, that you use a slower shutter speed. Not to give away your secrets, but to get that soft, silky, wispy type of effect that the water is almost a blur.
That look is kind of forced upon me and anybody else who photographs in these situations. Waterfalls photograph best under diffused lighting. That would be either in the shade or under some light cloud cover, because when that white water is in the sunshine, the light is too contrasty and it's just hard to get the exposure to work right. So I'm photographing under subdued lighting. I've almost always got a polarizing filter to cut down on reflections and bring out the richness in the colors of the moss and the tree leaves. And for those who are familiar with photography and depth of field, I like to stop my lens down to f11 or f16 to get as much depth of field as possible. All of those things I'm mentioning are forcing me to use a longer shutter speed. So it's not like I'm going down to a waterfall and saying I want silky water. It's just the lighting conditions, the settings on my camera that I have to use to get the focus and exposure dictate that I'm going to have that silky effect in the water.
So the water in motion chapter is what we are looking at. Do you have a favorite chapter in this book?
Anybody that knows me knows I love to photograph water, and that would be one of my favorite chapters. Of course, I've already mentioned the My Second Home chapter is the one that maybe contains some of my really favorite images. But I love photographing water. I'd have to say the one on visual gifts also is a favorite, because those are subjects that I didn't necessarily set out to photograph. I just was there and something presented itself to me that spoke to me, and I photographed it. So I guess that really, to answer that question, it's hard for me to pick a favorite chapter.
The Set in Stone chapter. I'm thinking if there's something about the Red River Gorge that truly stands out are all of the arches. Sky Bridge, Littleton Arch. Tell me some of the biggest and best there.
Well, the ones that I enjoy the most, Princess Arch is one of them, and that was featured on the cover of my first book. And,
it was.
And I also used that photo in this book. This book is probably 96% all new work since the first book, but there were half a dozen photos that I really wanted to reuse, and that was one of them. So Princess Arch is one of my favorites. I like Rock Bridge, which is right next to Recreation Falls on the Rock Bridge Loop Trail, and it's the only arch that spans a stream in Red River Gorge, is my understanding. Sky Bridge is extremely popular, and I guess next to Natural Bridge is the second most popular arch in Red River Gorge. Gray's Arch is a massive structure, very popular. I would say that of the ones in the gorge, Sky Bridge is probably number one in popularity, and Gray's Arch is number two.
You spent how many years gathering these photographs?
Well, this represents about 9 years' worth of work.
And here I sit with this book, and I'm just flipping through the pages, and I know what's going through your mind, John. You're saying, if he only knew what it took for me to get this shot. Well, let's just take one, for example, Misty Portal. Tell me about this.
Misty Portal is a view of Double Arch up close and personal. It was a cold February morning. It was 20 degrees. To get to Double Arch, it's about a 2.5 mile walk, I'm guessing. So to think that that we had gotten to the gorge on a 20-degree morning and walked 2.5 miles to get that photograph. Just lets me know when I see how beautiful the photo is that it was worth every step of the way. And what's really neat about this is because the fog was up above the ridge tops, it diffused the sunlight. And I've had several people ask me if I did that photo some way, and I said, it's too big. There's no way I could light it. Nature lit it for me.
Red River Gorge, My Second Home. We'll be back with our final few with the author. My name is Charlie Baglin. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We are back with our final few on Kentucky Afield Radio with Lexington photographer, author John Snell, talking about his new book, Red River Gorge, My Second Home. For someone who treks the gorge as often as you do, John, always with camera in hand, it's sort of like a beauty pageant of rock formations, arches, and waterfalls. Every image in this book has a story, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
I am humbled, John. My wife and I, we go to the Red River Gorge end of October or around Halloween, somewhere in there, to take pictures of the fall colors. They don't really compare to what you've taken. I go once a year. You go how many times in a year? 30,
35,
40?
Yeah, 30, 40 times, depending on the price of gas, to a degree, yeah.
I'm sure that you are a common sight. People see you there, and they know exactly that you're going to be walking away with some priceless photographs.
Well, sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. As you stated earlier, we don't show people our bad pictures. I have a lot of those, actually. But just being there and putting yourself in a place where something beautiful can happen. I've run into people from time to time that have been familiar with my work, and it's so interesting to see them on the trail, and just having some friends in that area that you can stop in, that makes those visits special as well.
Yeah, it is. It's your second home. If my best photograph is as good as your worst, then maybe I'm doing okay myself. I like this book. We're about out of time, but I do want to talk about people. Because people use the gorge in a variety of reasons. Coomer Ridge Campground or camp, the bird watch. They like botany. They rock climb. What are the most frequent uses you see of the gorge?
Well, just hiking. People just love to get out and walk the trails. And all of the trails, I've already mentioned the Rock Bridge Loop Trail, the Gray's Arch Trail. My favorite is the Auxier Ridge Trail. It's a 2-mile undulating ridgetop hike. It's not considered difficult. You just have to allow yourself enough leisure time to go out there. But once you get to the end of Auxier Ridge, there are 4 major rock formations you can see. You can see Double Arch, Haystack Rock, Courthouse Rock, and Ravens Rock, all pretty much from standing in the same spot. That's been my favorite trail over the years. I've walked it before daylight to go out and shoot sunrise. I've walked it after sunset on the way back to the parking lot. So hiking is probably the most popular activity there, and then I would have to say that rock climbing is maybe a close second.
They call it the red, the rock climbers do, and I've never heard that. I guess the rock climbers themselves know when they say the red exactly what they mean.
I've heard a lot of the rock climbing crowd refer to it as the red, yes.
We can't end this without talking about Miguel's Pizza.
I've been there a number of times, and it's a really interesting place. The seats are seats that were in an old school bus, and there's climbing gear hanging from the ceiling. They've since, in recent years, have opened a separate building for selling their climbing gear. But it's just a great gathering place. Miguel rents out space behind the restaurant for people to pitch a tent. He's also got what is almost like a dormitory, I guess you would call it, that he's built behind there, and rock climbers just flock to the area, and it's the stopping place for pizza and a place to pitch a tent for the night and then go out and climb the next day.
It's always crowded with tents.
Yes, absolutely.
Rock climbing is the place. I'm looking here at some of the photos you've taken. Rock climbing. This fellow here is doing some ice climbing, kayaking, hiking, photographing. There's trout fishing there. I see here you have a fella bicycling.
There's
canoeing.
An adventure race in the fall called the Fig, named after longtime forest ranger Don Fig, and it involves running, biking. I think they included zip line and canoeing. So there's several aspects of that. I don't know what the distance is, but it's pretty much a day-long race that takes place in November.
What haven't we talked about, John, that you really wanted to bring up about this book? One
of the things that I did want to mention is that a lot of people tend to put their cameras away when the leaves have fallen. And if you have a copy of the book that you can see, you'll notice that my winter chapter, which is called Winter Artistry, is about as long as any of the chapters in the book. I don't think for a minute of ceasing photography when the leaves have fallen, because I just love going over there in the wintertime. And the colder it gets, the better, because that means there are ice formations. I love to work on reflections. Some of the reflections you can't shoot in the summer when there are leaves on the trees, because it blocks the colorful sky in the morning at sunrise or in the evening, and those colorful reflections that you like to photograph on the water are not something that you can do when the leaves are on the trees. So I'd like to encourage people to explore Red River Gorge year-round, not just in the spring, summer, and fall, but also enjoy its special beauty at the wintertime.
Where can we find the book?
The books are available in most of the area bookstores in central Kentucky. They're also available at the Kentucky Artisan Center in Berea. Natural Bridge State Park Gift Shop has the book, and several of the businesses in the Red River Gorge area also carry the book. They can get the book directly from me. I can personalize it for them. Just go to johnsnellphoto.com, and there's an order form that you can download and send in to me. I'll be happy to get a book out to you.
So that's one way you can get it. Is it available via Amazon?
It would be available via Amazon. I think it's about the 270,000th most popular book at this moment, but we just got it in November, so it's gaining ground, and sales have gone really well.
Well, that's good. John, I appreciate you coming by and talking to this book, because it's your second home, is just as it is for a lot of people have ever been there, because they always want to go back.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and share about the book, to share about Red River Gorge. And as I've said in a couple of talks that I've given, and I'm grateful to the U.S. Forest Service and to Natural Bridge State Park and people like you who provide us with a playground to go and enjoy in a major way. So thank you.
It's been a good hour. Again, Red River Gorge, My Second Home by John Snell. Published at the end of the calendar year 2015 by Acclaim Press. Further information is available at johnsnellphoto.com. This is Charlie Bagwell inviting you to join us in a week, and we will go inside outdoors again, right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.